I'm joined now by Connor Tomlinson. He's political commentator with Young Voices UK. Joins me now. Connor, good morning.
Good morning, James.
Okie dokie. So let's take a little bit of a wander through the minefield that is COVID. So further wave of COVID is on the way. Austria have imposed various conditions, lockdown conditions on the unvaccinated. Do you think that there's any... is there any justification for that move?
No, because I don't think it's right in any instance. I wasn't one of the very pro-lockdown people at the start because I knew it probably wouldn't end. For the government to revoke basic freedoms from people based on their medical status, I don't think you can create an apartheid state with any justification, particularly when, as you already discussed on air, there is no predicate for saying you can eliminate transmission with a vaccine.
Well, it's not apartheid because the thing is that, first of all, if you want to have that permission, all you need to do is just go and get the vaccine, and it's based on medical advice. I mean, I kind of... I take the view that forcing anybody to have a medical procedure is not a good place to be. That having been said, if we are seeing that events, and it's very clear that if you have an event where a lot of people turn up and there are people who are unvaccinated, then you can still find that people will end up picking up the COVIDs. So isn't it right to restrict people and just say, look, you're going to have to be vaccinated?
No, because even if people show up to the event, you can still get COVID if you have been vaccinated.
Yes, but the effects. But we all know, though, that if you have been vaccinated, then the effect of COVID is far less pronounced on you.
That depends on the age group. So if people aren't at risk, for example, I had COVID. It was pretty much a mild head cold, and I wasn't vaccinated at all. And if you get COVID and you get far longer lasting natural immunity than you do with a vaccine, and as we discussed before between ourselves, if you get the first vaccine, that's why the dosages is being changed. The definition of double vaccinated from 2 to now 2 and a booster. It's because after 6 months, the immunity wanes based on which vaccine you get, between either 24 to down to 3%. So are we going to base our livelihoods and lives on continually getting booster vaccines, which, by the way, taxpayer money goes towards funding these companies, which have had a sordid history in the past of not doing exactly the best things.
But isn't it better to have booster vaccines and people kept out of hospital and people? I mean, we have seen that if people are not vaccinated, the cases do rise, and so do hospitalizations, and so do deaths. I mean, that is...
But in the most recent report, James,
that's clear.
That's not fully true. The most recent report actually had 78% of the people that died were double vaccinated.
No, I don't think that's right.
There was a death statistic report, I believe it was week 40, that said the most amount of people...
No, I think you're picking and choosing to conveniently support...
That was the ONS report, James.
No. The thing is that we also know that statistics can be manipulated. It is very clear that, of course, there are people dying with COVID and from COVID. And there will be people who will die continually, and they will happen to have COVID. It may or may not have sped up their sad demise. That having been said, we also know that most people who are dying from COVID have not been vaccinated.
I don't think that's true based on the statistics I've seen. I'm not saying the vaccine doesn't work, by the way. That's not my contention. I'm saying that clearly it doesn't work for everybody, and also there are side effects, so you can't stipulate that everybody gets it. Therefore, we can't do a policy of restricting people's freedoms based on their vaccine status. It's fundamentally immoral.
Okay, so what about if you want to get on a flight?
I don't agree with that, no.
So what are you going to do on the basis that, for example, you have to have a negative PCR test to get on a British Airways flight, and there are a lot of countries who will say, if you come and visit us and you are unvaccinated, you will have to go into quarantine?
I won't be able to visit those countries for as long as they have that policy.
There you go. Right. Says everything you need to know, Connor. You'll come round to the way of thinking in due course. Now, Daily Telegraph. Remembrance Terror Plot 3 held after fatal explosion. This is the story on the front of many pages. I guess this just demonstrates terror has not left our shores, has it?
Unfortunately not. We've seen this come in. Obviously, we can't presume exactly the motivation of the 3 men that have been detained at this point. But we have seen recurrently, with the inability to crack down on illegal migration, etc., it is a security risk. And if the case is that this is another Islamist terror attack, for example, on the day where we're celebrating Britain's fallen soldiers, like it was with Lee Rigby, it just shows that, unfortunately, we haven't had a handle on this problem. And the only people that should be celebrated in this particular instance aren't the counter-terrorism police, who are trying to do their jobs but not doing very effectively, but it's the cab driver who was fortunately able to detain one of the suspects.
If Boris Johnson admits an error then it's got to a situation in which he must feel under pressure. Boris Johnson last night accepted the blame for the Owen Paterson affair, admitting he could have handled it better. Is this a Prime Minister who is desperately trying to seek a solution to the fact that he's fallen in the polls? Is it that he's realised that he has made a number of mistakes? What can we expect from him?
I personally don't think that Boris Johnson is going to be taking the side of the principle in this case. It seems that he wavers with the polls and the focus groups data. He's seen a slip in his confidence in leadership publicly, with the Labour poll pulling slightly ahead. Typically, it was at the time where Keir Starmer decided to keep his mouth shut, so perhaps the Labour Party should take some advice from that, what they will. But Boris himself has been embroiled in the last year in plenty of corruption scandals, as have a lot of cabinet ministers, prompting the reshuffle. So I think I wouldn't say that we can come to expect any cleaner politics from Boris. Perhaps he just might be more careful about getting caught next time.
Well, okay, fair enough. Daily Star says, snow way out. Britain faces Icelandic barrage within days. They love a weather story. Meanwhile, the Daily Mail, Poppy Day bomb rocks maternity hospital is their front page. The Daily Express also has that story under the banner headline, Terror Probe into Poppy Day Blast. Rail plans scaled down in blow for levelling up, says the I newspaper. This is a mess. I mean, Boris Johnson seems to have done everything to antagonise the people who lent him their vote, in terms of he's put up tax, he's signed up to a whole load of green measures. He hasn't tackled migration across the channel particularly. He has made mistakes when it comes to dealing with the vaccination process. And now that hope, if you like, of levelling up through public transport investment seems to be dashed.
HS2 has been a massive money pit, really. That and obviously all the scenes of the illegally occupying activists along the route that are making giant tree houses hasn't been most.
But are you not in support of HS2?
I would be in support of HS2 if the planning wasn't such a disaster, because like most government projects, it never comes in under budget, does it? I mean, HS2 is a brilliant idea for connecting all areas of the country, but it doesn't seem to have been.
But I don't understand. Talking of planning process, what I don't understand is why they didn't take into account more sensitive areas and just put more under tunnels.
Because it's a government scheme and they don't normally do it all that constantly. I mean, if you've read the report on the petrol car ban, for example, there were no provisions about even charging ports. It's as simple as that. So I don't think you can expect it to be planned all that excellently based on the bureaucratic structure of it.
I just have to deal with something from Phil. Phil's very cross with me. James, shut up. In fact, I hope the US unvaccinated are locked down so that when cases rise, you can't blame it on us. You just believe what the government tell you. Lateral flow tests are rubbish and don't work properly. Off you trot to get your booster and be a good boy. I do wonder about some people and their comments. Never mind. Anyway, The Sun says hospital terror blast hero. They talk about that story. The Mirror, same story there. And The Times, 3 held by terror police after fatal blast. So those are the front pages. We will turn our attention to your stories, Connor, in just a few moments' time, and we'll have our uplifting news story of the day. I can sense your excitement. You're listening to Talk Radio.
On Talk Radio.
20 minutes past 6. It's all kicked off this morning. Further wave of COVID is on the way. So they say Austria has imposed lockdown conditions on the unvaccinated. And I'm asking you, what restrictions should unvaccinated people in the UK face? 03444991000 is my telephone number. And we've already realised that if you are unvaccinated, you are going to face some difficulties. I mean, if, for example, you go to Wales, you will have to show your vaccine passport to get into certain places in order to go and watch movies and sporting events, various other things. I'm not sure I necessarily support that, but we're in a difficult situation. Anyway, Connor Tomlinson, political commentator with Young Voices UK, is with me going through the papers. Connor, we could talk about that story all morning, but I dare say that that's not really doing our job. So we'll
upset Twitter with it as well.
No, we already have upset Twitter with it. A lot of people getting very, very cross. We could all write to feedback to complain that James Max is inciting discrimination. Ofcom, how do we make an official complaint about this? Oh, Grant, do just
you know what to do, lads.
Yeah, you know what to do. Just go to the Ofcom website. It's hard if you're that thick that you can't work out how to make a complaint. Then really, just go. Good luck with you. Anyway, it makes me laugh. Connor, let's turn our attention to the Queen. Should she scale her rollback at all? I mean, is there something more serious going on?
I think if she's having to scale her rollback, then I regret to speculate, but perhaps there is something more serious going on. As many as most of us would like to deny this fact, because we see her as a great stateswoman, she is very elderly and she has had a really rough year, not just with the stress of Prince Andrew and Meghan Markle and Harry, which we so adore talking about on Between the Sheets, but also the fact that Prince Philip died. A lot of people in their old age, when their partner goes, it's such a significant stress. They've had that person as their rock for so long that it does take their toll on their health. And unfortunately, the life expectancy isn't all that great after marriages. One party breaks up. We obviously don't wish that for the Queen, not least because Prince Charles gets on my nerves to no end. But if she's having to not be seen since October the 19th in any public capacity, then it's pretty concerning.
It is concerning, and obviously we wish her a speedy recovery and wish her well. Meanwhile, Connor, you do mention Between the Sheets. You and I were Between the Sheets last week, believe it or not. And
buy me a drink first, James.
Quite. It was very feisty. Between the Sheets. If you want to find it, you'll find it on the Talk Radio YouTube channel. It was a good one. It's the delve into the papers in which we just go off on one and you can see us in our full glory. Meanwhile, we need to fasten our seatbelts, Connor. I can sense your excitement for what can only be described as today's uplifting news story of the day. Now, Connor, I do need to ask you, what sort of generation would you describe yourself? Are you a Gen Z?
I think I'm just on the cusp of millennial, so I'm not one of the Fortnite playing generations, thank God.
Okay. Gen Z, afraid of a bit of hard woke, they say. Bonkers job demands. Gen Z job seekers are demanding £50,000 a year salary, free meals, no previous experience needed, and a midday finish on Fridays. These were certain must-haves, which were laid on by employees before Gen Zers, or laid on by employers before Gen Zers would accept a job. A poll of 22,000 Brits aged between 18 and 24. Have we, Connor, ended up with a whole load of youths and young people who, for whatever reason, don't understand what hard work is?
It's almost like the joke that I always tell my granddad every time we get a bit of work, where he goes, well, I hope the hours are 1 till 2 with an hour lunch break. We've seen a lot of the modern trendy offices where they're sitting on space hoppers and they've got hammocks for their breaks. I think this is born out of the university culture, where a lot of people were encouraged to go to university, not least of all because it made the job statistics look good with the unemployment.
Did you go to university?
I did go to university.
Did you have a nice time?
Not really, actually, because my uni was the hotbed of socialist action that caused all the strikes. We weren't given any compensation. I was the only sort of sensible right-leaning person on my course, even though I had made a few good friends, of course. And then lockdown came in, which meant that I squandered a lot of money on
your
that.
live stream with cowpats and the Devil's Own Satanic Herd. Let's turn our attention to the Independent. Johnson defends climate pact after backlash. COP26. Good time, bad time? You went there. Wasted time? I don't know.
It was a great time for me, and we actually had a lot of enjoyment in our fringe events where we got some MPs around the table, like Canada's Shadow Environment Minister, talking with a lot of the industry heads and the think tank people who said, hey, we need some supply side incentives for a lot of people to invest in these clean technologies that are going to get us out of the current stagnation we're seeing from a lot of the policies. So we're flatlining on emissions projections where we've gone down over the past. But in the halls of the UN, where there were vaccine passports by the by, so it doesn't mean that the best and brightest are going to get in there, we saw an agreement where it was a hell of a lot of compromise with nations like India and China, and we just sort of threw our hands up and said, oh, okay, we'll make enough concessions and we'll appease you, even though you're not really getting on side with decommissioning your coal and things like that. It seems that Boris has come out of it saying, oh, it's a 6 out of 10. Well, as anyone that goes on a night out knows, you don't come home bragging about getting home a 6 out of 10, do you?
Wow. Let's talk about the Daily Telegraph. Stop every migrant channel crossing. And then there are stories in the press that President Macron continues to send people across the channel because he wants to punish Britain for Brexit. I mean, this is just a ridiculous story that we're talking about humans and their lives. Quite how we've got into this position where, as a result of Schengen, it seems to allow freedom of movement of people across the continent in a way that just should never be allowed in the first place, combined with a perilous situation that we seem to be powerless to stop people crossing the channel. I find it absolutely extraordinary.
Much like a lot of the countries dump all of their rubbish that they can't recycle in poorer nations around the world, Britain's almost become the sort of dumping ground for people who are trying to seek a better life. As soon as the politicians on the continent realise, one, they don't have the financial infrastructure to pay for all the benefits they promised these people. Lots of people want to go for Germany, for example, but then they found out that the healthcare bankrupted them, providing free dental care to all the migrants. And two, a lot of the time, it's people that are in these sort of migrant camps on the Calais border and there. President Macron realises it's very impugn political optics for his candidates to the on the other side, for example, like Marine Le Pen, to bash him on and say you're just soft on migration. So he just goes, "Oh, send them to the Brits and they can deal with it later." And then it looks like he's also tough on Brexit. So you're correct; they are playing optics with people's lives. It's not like we have any shortage of compassion in this country, but we also can't take everyone in at the same time, and you also don't get to jump the queue.
Meanwhile, the Financial Times talks about the EU. They've now decided to target Lukashenko and their allies. Is this the right move by the EU?
I think it would be the right move to sanction the president of Belarus. But unfortunately, we're so reliant on Russia for oil and gas, particularly because President Biden turned off Keystone XL. So he's driven the global gas prices up. I hesitate to say, as we've seen with the COP26 deal, exactly what force we can put behind sanctions like this, because if we're looking to the Russian Nord Stream pipeline for all our energy needs, and while renewables aren't all that, then we're in a pretty precarious political position.
We certainly are. Now, Connor, we are out of time. If people want to find out more about you and what you're doing, where do they go?
You can go to Young Voices UK, and you can also follow me on Twitter, Con_Tomlinson, which you've linked in the promotional tweets for this particular episode.
Indeed, we have. Connor, thank you so much for joining us this morning. That's Connor Tomlinson, political commentator with Young Voices UK. Thank you for that. And go through the papers with us. And of course, you can find Connor and myself and others on Between the Sheets, which is hilarious, obviously. YouTube and the talkRADIO channel, you can find it there. Meanwhile,